Hello.
Hello, welcome back. It's the recap.
Friends, companions, compatriots,
Yeah,
it's
those
the recap.
things. It's happening.
It is happening.
I love these. These are my favorite parts of all of the arcs.
That's good.
I mean, it's sometimes it's my favorite. Depends if I have all sorts of fun things to talk about, or if I'm just poking you because you don't understand the dumb mystery.
I feel as though the quality of our recaps has significantly increased in Higurashi.
It has. It's funny what experience and time and resources can do in that regard.
Isn't it just?
It's great. No, I've been really enjoying the recaps over the last little while. Like, if you go back and you listen to our very first Sumaneko recap, it's like, I guess we're doing a recap now. But we called them tea parties back then. And we actually had tea and candles and stuff.
It's the middle of summer. We can't do that.
It's okay. When we get to winter...
it's the first day of autumn.
You're right. Technically, we're not in summer, but it's still just as hot.
But according to the weather forecast, summer is going to continue for another 2 months.
That was for the rest of the year, but...
Something global...
Climate change. We should drink about that. We're all going to die. Okay, so... Felix.
Yes, Ben.
Chikrono, Kartika, whatever your name is. I just wanted to ask you about how excited you are that now that we've finished Arc 3, we've finished all of the question arcs, we're just about to move into the answer arc stage with Keiichi. How do you feel about that?
Wait a second.
What?
Isn't there another question arc
to
go?
It's funny you ask about that because, yeah, there totally is. It's Himatsubushi or whatever the hell.
Himatsubushi.
The one that nobody can remember how to say it because it's very short.
It's not even the longest name, is it?
No, definitely not. Actually, no, because Matsuri Bayashi is the longest with 14. Anyway.
There's probably some anime arc there that's like 38 syllables long.
Probably. Well, there is an anime-only arc. I don't know what it's called, but it's right after the 6th arc at the start of the second season.
My goodness.
Anyway, we'll get there. We'll talk about that when we get to the end of the 6th arc, probably. But for us, this is basically the halfway point because Himatsubushi is not just like colloquially known, but actually the actual tie of it is the time-wasting chapter. So...
Really?
Yes.
That's interesting.
So I hope you're ready for that. The time-wasting chapter. It's going to be great.
So basically, Ryukishi got to this and he's like, oh, crap, I haven't finished Arc 5. Let me just power this one out.
Well, I imagine that the thought process was, I don't know if I've actually given everyone enough hints yet, so let me just throw in a little bit extra for you. So I think that was probably his thought process.
That sets a very peculiar tone for me for 4. Mm-hmm. Like... episode 4 in Umineko, as those of you who watched along with us then know, was probably my favorite.
Yeah. Which is a bit of a contentious opinion amongst fans, I feel. Pacing. But Arc 4 is one of those weird ones. It only gets 2 episodes in the anime because it is extremely short. So it's not even an hour worth of content in the anime version. I won't talk about what happens in it, but yeah, it's the shortest arc by far. And... definitely one that I am looking forward to looking back on and seeing what might actually be interesting in it beyond the minute of content that I remember being interesting from the first time, if that makes any sense. Because I don't know what's in the VN that was not in there. Also, we should look up the rules of Mahjong at some point.
Should we now?
Yeah, we just should for this arc, just for no particular reason. We should look up the rules of Mahjong and try and understand
Are we going to do the next recap 1 over a game of Mahjong?
I hope so. I mean, if you want to do an episode where we learn the game of Mahjong and just learn the rules, I'd be down for it.
It sounds like a lot of work. But listen, so is this whole thing.
It's alright, we'll give you a crash course.
So, the first thing I wanted to talk about for Higurashi is the translation.
Sure.
Just... what is with this chapter's translation? We pointed it out a lot as we went. There's
a lot of weird grammar and spelling issues. Shout out to Psycho. And there's also a lot of sentences that are phrased very much more poetically and strangely. And there's also some translations, there are some points where it's even pointed out in the comments of the videos, the mentioning that Irie is a doctor, for instance, happens much earlier than Ryukishi intended for that to be dropped. It was Irie sensei, which is just, teacher or elder or whatever. And they're like, hey, Dr. Irie! And you were like, oh, doctor, there it is!
I wasn't actually.
Yeah, I mean, you weren't. But you should have been. And then there was also Bitch and Satoshi, which I'm just really sad.
Yeah, that one was pretty
That's the line that I care the most about. Bitchin' sad is she. Let's do this. Best line.
I would be fascinated to know what the translation process was for this arc.
Sure, yeah.
Because it is so ridiculously inconsistent.
I was gonna say.
There were points where we said it was like Dr. Seuss. There was points where we said it was like fucking Lord of the Flies.
I wonder how many people they had on the team, right? Like, I wonder if they had, like...
Not only how many people they had on the team,
sure,
but how many stayed on for the full leg. Because
exactly,
I wouldn't be surprised if this went through 4 different translators,
yes.
and they each did, like, a section.
That's what I mean,
none of them proofread each other.
Yep. And then they all came together and wrote rewrite, and that was the story of that. Yeah, that would make sense for me. The best part is you haven't read that, but it's totally true. Anyway, yeah, no, like, I feel like it was either they started off with 5 translators and then the project took longer than it was supposed to, so people started dropping off, or they just did different sections. Because there is, a little bit of consistency in some of the, like, honorifics that I use at least, but... yeah, it's very strange. I'd love to, like, talk to someone who was on that team and see what the heck happened. I think it must get better as we go forward. Like, the first 2 chapters were pretty good in that regard. They seem pretty generally consistent. So hopefully, Arc 4 and onwards, they get their shit together.
Yeah, I definitely hope so. I think, like... the typos are one thing, because, like, that happens. And especially considering how pathetic of a production schedule this has been through.
Yeah.
I don't imagine it's getting enough focus to the point where, like, doing proofreads for typos is, like, even on the table for the team.
Yeah.
So if anything, I think we're lucky to have this many, like, this few.
Yeah. It was funny, actually. I was talking to someone who, they're not on the translation team, but they do QA testing and stuff for Manga Gamer. Talk about how, like, I was like, how come the, like, translation team hasn't come back and update all these typos? And she was like, has anyone, like, told them? Has anyone actually told Manga Gamer about all these typos?
Consider this your notice.
So I'm just saying, if anyone in the comments, not me, because I don't have enough time. Tweet this video at them. Find out all the bits.
Link in the top right now. We're clipping this section, making it its own video so you can tweet it to them and they're not like, what is this hour-long garbage?
Yeah, exactly. Just, like, let them know. Tweet at Manga Gamer. Make a list of the freaking typos. Let them know that this shit is going down. We let the top brass know so they can sort it out. And none of this wait and see nonsense. You know what I'm saying?
But let's get back to the arc, because as much as we can bitch about the translation, that's not the story that we're here to deal with.
It's true. All right.
It is the product we're dealing with.
Yeah, sure.
But
So what do you want to talk about?
I think that the one thing that this chapter brought back, which I really loved, was the hopelessness.
Yeah.
Like, it was something that was definitely there kind of in the, I guess, scope of Arc 2. Like, you could definitely see the hopelessness with which Mion and or Shion dealt with everything that happened to them in Arc 2. And it's been a follow-through theme of the whole series. But I think that the perspective that we took on it this time was probably the most interesting that we've had so far.
Sure.
Like, in terms of how they've handled it.
Now, which parts are you thinking of when you think of hopelessness?
Like, because, in the first arc, I guess the hopelessness is Rena trying to save Keiichi. In the second arc, it's Mion and or Shion trying to get, like, validation for who they are.
Sure.
To put it in extremely simple terms, though, I'd definitely not sum it down that much if I had to. In this arc, it's the hopelessness of, like, things carrying on the way that you want them to. Like, I feel as though everyone's had a point in their life where they're like, oh, God, this is great. I love the way my life is right now. And then it changes. Yeah. Because that's just the way things are. Yeah. Like, you... And even if it didn't change, you'd eventually probably wear tired of it.
Yeah, for sure.
So I really like the approach where Keiichi was constantly trying to get back to the way things were before and making actions that took him further and further away from the way things were before.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because his whole goal when he decided to take this big action and kill someone to get his life back, he said, I want to make it so that this never happened. I want to make sure the beginning of this murder never happened, and that's how I'm going to get away with it. And then the world he ends up with is one in which apparently it never happened, and that's what's really great about it. To me, the part of Keiichi's kind of journey that he goes through in this arc is the most interesting to me, is the part where he confronts, or I guess maybe Sadako confronts him on the bridge.
Yeah.
And she keeps her towel on, thankfully. And she says, like, I can't believe you turned this monster and all this stuff. And he's like, I didn't do this to be thanked by you, but, like, is that true? did he not do this in some respect to be, like, thanked by Sadako for, like, giving her life back? Did he not do this to, like, gain some happiness for himself? Is that not his point?
I think that's part of the beauty of how that scene is written.
Yeah.
Is that Keiichi has so lost sight of what it is that he enjoyed about his life before.
Yes.
That there is an epic futility in everything that he has done.
Everything he's done is totally meaningless. His whole, like, journey to try and save Sadako seems to have only made it worse somehow.
Yeah. The other thing I really like about their detail of hopelessness is that seems like exactly what Satoshi did the year before.
Maybe, yeah.
And there's this brilliant ambiguity of, like, how much did Satoshi's actions parallel Keiichi? It seems like a lot, like a ridiculous amount to the point it's absurd.
I mean, this hasn't even been just in this arc. It's been all the way back since arc 1 when I was like, oh, he started carrying about roundabout as well before he transferred. Like, that theme of history repeating itself and Keiichi following in the footsteps of Satoshi, pun intended, like, that keeps coming back around, and it's very much a focus.
And the thing I particularly love about the way that it's executed in this chapter is, like, the whole idea that Keiichi has already seen what the outcome of what he's about to do is.
Sure.
Things didn't go back to the way they were. Satoshi's disappeared. People have died and everyone found out about it.
Yep.
Like,
he's like, I'll do it differently this time, and then he totally doesn't.
Just does everything
and that's what's
exactly
great.
the same.
That's why I love Keiichi's character so much. We talked about this while he was doing a murder, but, like, he's like, I'm going to make it so that it's clean and perfect, and no one on the way was here, and if I find anyone, I'm going to kill them because that's how determined I am. And then he fucks up the murder. He doesn't kill me in one hit. He takes a lot longer than 1500 seconds to actually catch Teppei. He then meets Takano on the road and then can't kill her. Like, everything about his plan to make it differently from how it was with Satoshi, it falls apart immediately.
Incredible.
And this is why not only do we love the futility of it, but we love Keiichi because he's such a good boy who did nothing wrong.
Speaking of that whole actual incident with Teppei, I was pretty locked into the fact that what would happen was that the corpse would disappear.
Yeah.
And we'd get back there and Keiichi would be like, what? How did this happen? But it'd be obvious to us as an audience that the corpse had just been carried away by some mysterious force roughly in the shape of a hill and a dog.
Yeah.
And I was pretty confident on this most of the way through until Irie in the hospital was like, yeah, he's nuts. He can't remember how the incident happened at all. Like, it's one of those moments where it could either be a trick or it could be Ryukishi saying, like, maybe there's something else you should consider about the way things happened. Maybe Keiichi did hallucinate the whole thing.
Yeah.
But then we get to the question of, in either option that we pick there, if we pick that the incident actually happened and that Irie's line wasn't true about him not remembering the incident properly, then we say that Irie's line about him not remembering the incident properly isn't true and we have to assign a different meaning to that. Or we flip it around and we say that Irie was right and then we have to assign a meaning to the entire scene of him murdering Teppei.
Sure, yeah.
Which is not incredibly far-fetched in either scenario. Like, there's definitely ways that you could justify why Ryukishi wrote that. But in either way, in either case, you basically need to disregard the face value quite significantly of either moment.
Sure.
Which is a really interesting puzzle that has made me significantly less confident in the fact that Keiichi actually killed Teppei.
Sure. Well, I mean, a big kind of focus of this arc with Keiichi, running around with his bat is, as I've said, one of the things that Ryukishi likes to talk about because he was a social worker is, like, the power of kids and the fact, like, one of the things that he has kind of an almost morbid fascination with is the fact that in society we think, oh, this is a bunch of kids and they're frustrated and they say they're going to murder their teachers with a bat, but they never do. But, like, Ryukishi thinks that kids have, like, a real power. And I think that that's something that he tries to explore. Like, Keiichi is capable of murdering someone. Whether I suppose this is a fantasy of his or the reality is up to interpretation, but that's definitely the argument that he's making, especially with how visceral those scenes feel to Keiichi.
Yeah. I think ultimately because of the way that everything else is, like, the bike is still missing, the bat's still missing, all of that stuff, Like, I still think that it actually happened. It's just very difficult for me to assign the intention of those scenes.
Yeah.
Because that's the way I unpack these stories.
Sure.
As I'm sure people are familiar with by this point. The other thing that was really interesting about like assigning meaning to in this chapter was the opening with God, what's her name? They mentioned it like once, and
I believe it was Rina.
Anyway,
R-I-N-A.
that character, who I assume is Teppei's partner, love affair, whatever,
Maybe
from outside of town. But I really do love. I didn't catch this so much when we actually read it through because we had a bit of a break. But the direct parallel between going out of the all cast review session where everyone's like, well, it's the Sonozakis, it's the Sonozakis all throughout Arc 2, and me closing out with like, well, that's too on the nose, it can't be them, it's got to be something else. To then opening Arc 3 with, does this have anything to do with the S group?
It's a nice little callback, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a very quick callback as well.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think I've definitely struggled with a lot with the mystery in this story is that everyone seems too suspicious. Like, Takano is so on-the-nose villain that it's gone past too obvious to so obvious it has to be true again.
Yeah, yes, sir.
And then
you gotta suspect someone.
The Sonozakis are currently sitting in that threshold of so obvious it can't be true. But then to me right now, they're like teetering over the edge towards that second category, to the point that I'm actually growing more suspicious of the Sonozaki twins.
Really?
Yeah, I think I've been pretty tight on the whole military and Takano and Tamataki this whole time, but like I'm strangely enough kind of starting to bring the Sonozakis more into this when it feels like that's the opposite of what I should be doing.
I mean, how much have they really figured into this arc? Like, not that much, really.
Not much, but that's the kind of thing where they were dropped in right at the start of this arc.
Yeah, I know, dude.
Which makes me wonder if that was like, hey, maybe you should look for more clues of them acting. I'm really excited to go through an editing and see if that does end up being the case.
Yeah,
where they have.
I wouldn't underestimate the Sonozakis, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, like, I'm not dropping the Takano thing, obviously, because I think that's like, as I said, it's too on the nose, past the point where it's too obvious it can't be true. I don't think that is untrue at this point, especially with the whole Defense Force thing coming in at the end. But because it was the Sonozakis that did something to Teppei to bring him into the village to then provide the like cover story for what happened in the village, is there then a collusion between the Sonozaki family and Takano in the way things carry out? Like, in Arc 2, does Shion agree to go into the shed because she has some agreement with Takano that her family has set up that we haven't had on screen yet?
Right. Well, I think that might slightly tie in with something that was kind of fun that we saw, that maybe we'll talk a bit more in the latter section of this recap here. But the like ending scroll had all the deaths of all the characters,
it did too,
which was really cool. And there are a couple of Sonozakis on there, if memory serves.
Yeah,
I don't know if you have that pulled up and ready.
I do. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
And the audience has no clue what's just happened.
It was the perfect turn!
The perfect turn.
All right, let's do it.
So, yeah, like, there were a few of them that I caught as we were going past live, because, they were... I think it's pretty easy to, like, read that until one of the, like, broken words makes another word inadvertently.
Yep.
Then it becomes exceedingly difficult.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Have you gone through and found all the little messages that are hidden?
Well, that's just what I pulled up. Also, I did want to point out, it was, in fact, I did remember correctly where it was back in the poems at the start.
Yeah, of course it was.
When you were like, do you remember where the broken text is? I was like, it's in the poems. And then I'm like, wait, but I can read the poems. Yes. Where is it? It can't be in the poem. Is it in the... no.
Is it near the poems? They're on the same screen? Yeah, I mean, I'll be real. I'm at the point where I can read it, like, pretty fluidly because I've read all of them. But, like, yeah. I was going to wait until you brought it up to be like, yo, maybe we should check out that, like, broken text, because there's some really fun little, like... I would almost say, or like author notes written in the margins for us to peruse.
Yes, my favorite one.
The second one
is Takano's.
Yeah,
yes,
of course it is. It's great.
I made this character seriously suspicious.
It's great.
Seems kind of like the last boss. Maybe she should be the one to take the punches in the end. I need to make her so bad even Coach would punch her. Maybe a full transformation is in order.
So this is a really fun one. There's multiple aspects of this.
So you remember
fun.
when I said it had gone past being so obvious it can't be true? This has put the needle into the red of the next section.
Yeah, it's great. I really love these little notes that he's written. It's very kind of it's kind of crazy he puts them in at all, because it's like, this is how I'm writing this character. He like pulled all pretense away. We could fully see his intent.
Yeah, I think the really fun thing particularly, and the reason I like Takano so much, is because there's almost a confidence in the fact that, like, yes, she's the suspicious one.
Yeah.
I know it. And that's what he wants you to notice, and he's showing you with this.
Yep, for sure.
Like, that was one thing I brought up when Takano first had this super suspicious scene in Arc 2.
Daggers in the eyes.
Is that if we are being shown her this suspicious now, something else has to be more important about why she's suspicious.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, it's definitely true. He wants you to think that she is a suspicious character. I also like that he has that note, I need to make her so bad even Coach would punch her. So he already has an idea of, I imagine, Irio's character.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. There's a lot of really good stuff in here. I don't want to go through all of them, but do any others, like, kind of stick out to you as being particularly interesting?
I mean, the mental disorder thing, it's nice to have that, like, addressed there. It's the Hinamizawa syndrome.
What?
That's what it's called. Yeah. That's what the community calls it these days. I'm so happy that it has a name rather than just the madness.
Yeah, it's a good name.
I felt so rough having to say that.
Yeah.
Because I was like, there's got to be a community name, but he's not going to tell me.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to have some pokes at what exactly Hinamizawa syndrome is, you know, very lined out some of your theories, but we're learning a lot more about it now.
Yeah. It's such a strange thing, because part of me wants to just say, like, no, this cannot be a thing because it's not a mystery thing. Like, this mysterious disease, syndrome, whatever, that's an unexplained occurrence that we don't understand without having it, like, exposited to us. And, you know, obviously we're being shown the symptoms as we go, but in terms of the strict mystery sense of trying to solve, like, is it this thing? It's so difficult to puzzle out.
Yeah.
But also, once we get to the whole, like, military thing, which I'd obviously raised a lot earlier, like, it's one of these things that's always kind of explicitly been in the background, I feel. Like, the conspiracy, this guy's training to be a sniper in, like, the second chapter of the first arc. I'm so bewildered by the fact that it's true, because it was, again, one of those things where I was like, you know, wouldn't it be funny if it was this? It is? It is this? That's one of the things I wanted to bring up in this recap is when it comes to, like, posing theories in mystery novels, Ben.
Yeah.
I'm going to pitch something to you.
Sure, go for it.
Theories in mystery novels are like gaslighting.
How so?
Because when I pose, like, a bunch of theories, it's only the ones that are brought up again by the story that I will continue to harp on.
For sure.
So even if I make, like, 100 incorrect guesses, as slowly the incorrect ones are filtered out by the fact that they're never brought up again, eventually we get to this correct conclusion.
And then we realize that you were right all along.
Yes.
With no mistakes.
No mistakes whatsoever.
It's almost like I am very aware of this.
I'm sure you
and
are.
I've brought this up a couple of times in the past, but yeah, no.
So, like, there's this brilliant thing that's happened where, you know, I'll make a joke theory, and then the joke theory will be brought up again, and then again, and then again, and then again. Yeah.
Of course, I can either confirm or deny any of this nonsense that you're spouting right now about the military and shady cover-ups and shit.
Well, I mean, the thing that's really annoying is that, like, when I said, like, you know, military conspiracy, Takano's this, that, the other, like, because that started as a joke theory, there's no, like, detail to it. I'm not like, this is how Takano did this. This is where the military came in and did this. This is how they did this is how they did this.
Yeah.
And now I'm at a point where they've made an appearance and I'm like, oh, I have to do that now.
You have to go back and see if there's some more shit.
Yeah.
Come up with a timeline, maybe.
Which is explicitly the point of the post-edit recap.
Of course it is.
Say.
So good luck. At least you get to go through the whole of Arc 3 again and find all the fun little tips and things.
You know, speaking of going back through previous arcs, I did want to talk about Rika.
What about Rika? She's just a cute little girl. She has no significance.
Rika is one of these characters that, as you've said, she just disappears.
She does.
She just goes away. Like, in Arc 1, I don't know, she was probably eaten by crows again, because that seems to be the implication of the story. In Arc 2, she was thrown into a pit.
Yep.
In Arc 3, she's murdered by Keiichi in a timeline he doesn't remember. Like, she's a character she is a character that, based on screen time alone, is amongst the least significant.
I think Kameda-kun got more screen time than her this arc.
I'll leave that to the community to puzzle that one out.
Living screen time.
Yeah.
There we go.
But going back in editing, she's one of the characters that's, like, inadvertently mentioned in so many ways.
Sure.
And I particularly like the way that the information is delivered, particularly when it comes to Oyashiro-sama and her family's tie to it.
Sure.
All of the things about her connection to Oyashiro-sama are delivered in such a way that the timing doesn't line up such that you piece them together easily.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I've done a lot in editing, is realize, like, oh god, this thing refers to Rika's family. Like, there was some moment early on in editing where I was like, I said something along the lines of, you know, is Rika part of the lineage of the person that was originally Oyashiro-sama?
Yeah.
Because, like, it's implied when we were talking about, like, the different modes of myth, it's implied that there's a family history of the Furudes in Hinamizawa stretching back to Oyashiro-sama. So, you know, it's probably just one of her ancestors that's been deified by story in the village.
Maybe.
But because of this significance, there are a bunch of other things that start to get tied into it, you know, such as the whole idea of Oyashiro-sama's vengeance for things that have done. Like, is Rika actually the one that's like, yo, they broke into the shed, could you do something about that to these mountain dogs?
Do you find Rika suspicious at all?
Oh, so suspicious. But it's this weird suspicion where, like, I don't think she's... How do I put this? Like, in the same camp as I've put Uishi.
Sure.
Where, like, he's clearly involved and responsible, but not, like, the one behind it.
Yeah. Well, Uishi does die in this arc, which is a bit sad, honestly.
Well, he died off screen, doesn't really count.
I guess so, but just the idea of Uishi's heart stopping beating before he gets to enjoy his retirement just hurts me. Gets me right in the cojones.
You're right.
It's right where it gets me.
But especially when it comes to that dialogue between Keiichi and Rika in Arc 2, where the whole cats and dogs thing came up.
Yeah, the trickster cat.
Especially once we have the mountain dogs as a proper noun in the story, then it's like, okay, that recontextualizes this whole conversation in theory. Because, you know, Rika's talking about, like, leave it to me. I'll make sure that the dog doesn't bite the cat about breaking into the shed. So, like, does Rika then go and talk to someone that then leads to the actions of the rest of the arc?
I don't know.
In Arc 1, after the Watanagashi Festival, Watanagashi Festival, Shion, Takano, and Tamataki break into the shed without Keiichi in Arc 1, and then Rika's like, excuse me. And then the mountain dogs go and get rid of them. Or is Takano aligned with the mountain dogs, and she, you know, Rika comes to her and is like, listen, you can't break into the shed. You're gonna have to be the one that mysteriously dies this time. Here's how you fake your death.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to confirm or deny anything you're saying, obviously, but I like that you're thinking about what are the connections between characters behind the scenes, because this is definitely something, once again, that has been around since Arc 1, when first Keiichi was like, yo, people died at the dam. Good friends of mine, would you tell me something about that? And they're like, no, we won't tell you anything. It's like, shit, they're the murderers, or they know the murderers, or they're in on it, or something. The whole village is out to get me, and he's got this whole like web of deceit and murder, building up around him. And maybe there's some merit to that theory.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I really just I'm upset by, where it's so on the nose that I'm like, does it have to be this?
I don't know, dude.
But I don't know. I feel like a few people were probably off-put by the fact that you told me the whole like friendship theme before we went into this story.
I think you didn't you read about that before we even started?
Yes, we did.
So get out of here. I told you.
Anyhow.
I mean, I'd tell you that anyway, but...
The point being, though, that strangely enough, I've gone from not suspecting any of the club to basically suspecting all of them.
What are you talking about? I thought that the whole point of this that Ruki's writing was that kids were powerless and victims of circumstance and definitely not capable of murder.
It's fantastic.
Don't underestimate these kids, that's all I'm saying.
Once again, Ryukishi has done the thing where I've come into the story with the expectation of like, all right, everyone's going to be suspicious, and then we start reading, and I'm like, whatever, themes of friendship, it's probably this one person, and then we've come back to a point now where I'm like, everyone's suspicious.
Yeah.
He's brought me full circle, and I love the way that he plays with my expectations like that.
I mean, you suspected Setoko of murder during the arc a couple of times. You were like, did she like push her parents off a viewing platform? Is that what happened? You're suspecting the littlest of them.
Yeah, like...
Although I guess Rika might be a little bit littler. Anyway, point is...
Yeah, but again, that was one of those things where it was like, oh, okay, well, this is a weird thought. And then it was brought up again.
Yeah, sure.
Going back to that whole, like, gaslighting thing.
Yeah, sure.
Like, to me, that was a throwaway thought. And then that tip brought up, like, her responsibility for some action later on. And I'm like, okay, no, that's an uncomfortable parallel.
Yeah, for sure.
I think while we're on the topic of Sadako, I did want to address how tastefully Ryukishi addressed like some pretty grave topics.
Yes.
Like
I
feel like even touching on those topics in most Western literature would just be out of the question.
Absolutely taboo. Yep.
And right up until the whole towel thing happens, which I'm still not happy with.
We're not okay with. We're going to have to do something about that shit. But he does approach child abuse in a very good way. In a way that is tasteful, and it still brings the gravity of the situation across.
Yes.
I would... this is what we'll talk about in a little bit, but like, I would say one of the things that I find a little bit annoying is we don't actually get to talk to Sadako herself too much in this arc. Maybe it just feels that way because of the way that we kind of pace the recordings, but I feel like we could have more time talking with her. But certainly the way that he handles the issue is very respectfully done. Which I'm okay with.
I think to counterpoint that, I do agree with you, but just as like devil's advocate type thing, I think that because we are looking at from Keiichi's perspective, where he's like, oh, well, I can't get my hands dirty and talk to Sadako, I just gotta fix it.
Sure. Like, I mean, for sure, the way that that Keiichi handles the situation is very much part of his character.
Yeah.
That he isn't like, let me go, like, find Sadako and talk about what she wants.
It's again, like, a criticism of the way that people and systems behave around such issues. Like, the idea that, this is taboo, we can't talk about it, so Keiichi doesn't talk about it and just tries to take action.
Yeah, sure. But, it's just something that I've been kind of thinking about, because now that we're at the end of the third arc, I think it should be pretty obvious to you that each of these arcs so far has focused on a different girl. And this is Ryukishi trying to emulate the route structure that Key novels use and that a lot of other visual novels use. So the first arc, I would argue, Keiichi and Rena. Second arc, Keiichi and Mion and or Shion. Third arc, Keiichi and Sadako. They're not in a romantic sense, more of in a protection kind of sense.
Which I would argue is the same in 2, but besides the point.
Sure, that's entirely up to your interpretation. But each arc so far has focused on a different girl.
Yeah.
And that is how most novels do this sort of thing. You have your intro, your slice of life intro arc, and then you have the different character arcs that each focuses on a different girl, and then you have your true end at the very end that doesn't focus on anyone in particular, or maybe focuses on the protagonist. It's funny though that despite my saying that the first arc is kind of the Rena arc, it's in Ryukishi's production diary he refers to it as the Keiichi arc, which is fun. Funny that if only there were a Rena arc somewhere for me. Anyway, we're getting there. Point is, that's kind of how he structured it.
Here's what will please you, Ben, is that
what?
he could be saying that Keiichi's the question and Renner is the answer.
I would, you know what, I'm not going to say that. I ain't give vote on I nothing. But yeah, people's rules may surprise you. Anyway, point is, that's something to tackle your brain about.
Oh boy.
Seeing what the future might hold with these different arcs.
Alrighty, it's that time of the video. It's Umineko spoilers time.
Is it?
Do you have anything you want to address?
Hold on, let me just double check real quick. I've been making notes. Oh yeah, there was one thing I want to bring up for sure. Shout out to Rockmore again for being the best person ever. They've translated more production diaries, and in the making of Tatari Higurashi, he's decided finally that he's gonna focus on marking these as murder mysteries. He was doing that like a little bit before, but he realized that for whatever reason, the people who had this story marketed them as murder mysteries had like the highest satisfaction with the work. They're like, that's exactly what you said it was going to be, and it was great. Rather than like gouge marketing. I think there was a Galgate, whatever, marketing that he was doing beforehand, because of course his intent with writing these novels was like, it's a bunch of cute girls, and then they all start killing each other. But those people just didn't enjoy it as much.
That is absurd to me.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? Marketing, it's great.
Not that like people enjoyed it more when it was presented to them as a murder mystery, because I think that given the story that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
What doesn't make sense to me is that Ryukishi didn't address this as a murder mystery.
He just didn't at first. He was like, it's a game with cute girls, and then it gets darker. And yeah, this is also around the time when he started using the phrase challenge the mystery, or challenge the tragedy, sorry. That's something that is on all of the marketing for it now. Challenge the tragedy. See if you can stop it from happening. How would you stop? What is the solution?
That is really
Which is something that's also brought up in the Allcast review session, which I'm sure you loved. The other phrase that he starts using, there's all sorts of stuff. I'm just rattling them off now. But the other one that he starts using is the 1% success rate, because he had 100 people email him with their answers to the first arc, and only one of them, Yoshio, got it right. So yeah, this Twitter post that Rockmore translates, shout out to Rockmore, is like all of the marketing stuff. Like Ryukishi has finally figured out what kind of story he's actually writing and the stuff he wants to focus on, which of course is going to lead us eventually to Umineko when we get there.
I wanna use that point to transition over to the Umineko spoilers section.
Yeah, so, let's do it.
As always, the rules with the Umineko spoilers section is that we're going to try and avoid story spoilers, but we're going to have a few context spoilers.
Yep.
So if you're not too worried about spoilers, it's okay to stick around.
Yep.
But if you want to be completely clean, get out of here.
We'll still mostly be talking about Higurashi.
And thank you for watching this far.
Thank you.
So the thing I wanted to talk about with that in relation to Umineko is, obviously Umineko is explicitly a deconstruction of murder mysteries.
Yep.
So he's obviously like changed the tack of When They Cry from being like a tragedy series to a murder mystery series.
Yep.
And not to say that those are mutually exclusive in any way. They're obviously blends of.
Not at all, yeah.
But that's a really fascinating change.
Because he started off wanting to emulate the Key style, which is something that I've been talking about this entire... It's all a plan. It's all a plan, is what I'm saying.
The other thing is, as we were talking about in previous recaps and previous videos, is the whole idea that he didn't have everything planned out top to bottom when he started.
No, for sure.
And listen, people fighting us in the comments, Funk, we're going at you again.
Yeah.
It's one of these things where I completely agree with the perspective that Ryukishi had a plan from top to bottom, but he did not have the whole thing planned out top to bottom.
This is especially relevant for Umineko because some people have, like, I mean, even you in the playthrough point out quite a bit of, foreshadowing. You're like, well, obviously, because he's using this, imagery here, and it's happened 2 or 3 times now, these scenes all seem to be the same scene, just like with different characters.
Yeah.
So obviously that's going to be our end point, which we won't spoil here. But same sort of deal. In the Allcast review session for Higurashi, we have a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge moment where Mion and Shion are like, wouldn't it be crazy if someone worked at Angel Mort, and thus that's how people knew that Keiichi went there, because someone worked there. And then Shion steps forward, was like, that would be really funny if I would have told my sister about what that time I saw Keiichi. And people have come to me. They've come to me, Megas. They've come to me and they've said... They said, Megas, you see, this is evidence that he had Sion planned out from day one, you see, because that is the solution. But the thing is, there are 1,000 different solutions that would work for that puzzle.
The family owns the restaurant.
Anyone at that restaurant, including Mion herself, could have been there and seen him. Because, and this is the thing, Keiichi goes there, he doesn't recognize anyone there. So if she looks the same as Mion, they have exactly the same impetus for being there. So this is the point I'm trying to make here is that, like, it's okay to say Ryukishi probably planned out the ending or he planned out these characters. Like, there's
I think
evidence.
it's okay to say any of it.
Sure. But that doesn't mean that it's true.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, I'm with you entirely. I think we're both on the same page here. Like, even in these, like, unjumbled notes, you've got, like, I think maybe this character should be, like, seem like the villain. And Coach would want to punch her. Like, even Coach, like, clearly this Coach guy, he's a happy, he's a fun-loving, you know, German doctor or whatever.
Yeah, like, this is written from the perspective of, like, this is how I'm planning on changing my intention with this character.
This is how I'm imagining that it will go forward. And he's got plans for Coach. He's got, like, maybe I'm going to give Mion a twin. Maybe I'm going to do XYZ. Maybe Takano's going to be a bad guy.
I wonder if Kasai really has a thing for Shion. That would be so cute.
No comment. No fucking comment. I think the age difference might be a bit much
Just
there.
a bit,
but anyway,
just a bit.
What arc is that for? Do you know? Is that for
This is
arc
for 3.
Oh, for 3.
This is for
this
3.
is all for 3. Yeah, okay, good. That's great. He doesn't even appear in this arc.
I know, that's the best part.
That's amazing.
Like,
oh my god. I love it. Anyway, no. This is the thing, is that, like, he's got all these notes. Clearly there are things that, and as we were saying with the way that Felix is laying out his theories, it's the same sort of jam where these are all the theories that could be correct, and we're going to eventually focus in on the one that is brought up a bunch of times. Same sort of deal with these notes. Like, just because he's written maybe Kasai has a thing for Shion doesn't mean that that's true.
Yeah.
We have a saying in the tabletop biz that it's not true, it's not canon until it hits the table. And in this case, it's not canon until I see it in the damn novel. Which is fine, because lots of mystery novels and fiction in general goes through that creative, like, evolutionary process. Like, these are the plot points that I've set in stone, but until I present them to the audience in a clear and unobfuscated manner, they are not necessarily set in stone.
yeah, there was a mystery author who I don't know a lot about, because this was, like, the first thing I heard about her from, but
Sure.
she's a mystery writer from the UK who did an interview on one of our national radio stations here in Australia. Her name's Anne Cleves.
Yep.
And she came on, and the host of the show was, like, talking about, you know, how they unpack mysteries, and, you know, how she gets her inspiration, and how the stories are written about, like, the places that she's lived, and how she draws on that.
Sure, yeah.
And the host asked, so how do you come up with these, like, fascinating puzzles, and how do you know, like, who killed who? And she's like, I don't even know who's the culprit when I start a story.
Yeah,
I don't even necessarily know who's going to be dead.
Yeah.
And it's like, that to me is, like, the way I expect most writers operate, kind of turned up to 11 though,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Because I think Ryukishi is the kind of author that goes in with a plan and is like, all right, this is, you know, this is my start point, this is my end point, here are a bunch of checkpoints that I want to reach, here are a bunch of themes that I want to address, and, you know, the kind of, he seems like the kind of writer to me that has, like, a character Bible. For those of you who aren't familiar with the concept of character Bibles, it's basically you have just, like, a small notepad book, whatever, of all of the things about this character, and as you come up with them, you add to the Bible or check the Bible to see that there are no contradictions, or to flesh out the character as you go. It's the whole idea that, like, if, you know, especially with serialized TV shows, if every episode was like the pilot, the show would never really grow to become great. Like, especially if you watch the pilot episode of a show compared to, like, 10 episodes down, with the exception of BBC's Sherlock. Because the pilot episode is better than the rest of the series.
Okay, good to know.
Like, for the most part, a TV show will grow based off the things that happen through it. And the same for writers, the same for any creative work. Like, it's a practice makes perfect kind of environment.
Yeah, for sure.
As most environments are, funnily enough.
Yeah.
So I think for Ryukishi, like, for example, you know, he probably, if we're going with, like, the whole military thing, he was like, all right, cool, well, I want to introduce military themes to this story early on, but not have them, like, explicitly be a part of it.
Yeah.
Here's a mention of a sniper in the first 2 chapters.
Sure.
So that's the kind of thing that, like, he maybe didn't know how significant the military aspect of the story was going to be. I imagine he probably had the disaster planned out, because there definitely are some moments earlier on with the whole, like, miasma thing, where he clearly had it fleshed out and foreshadowed for a long time. But, you know, the execution probably wasn't planned, and that mention was in there early on, so that he had the room to drop in that connection without blindsiding the audience.
I mean, shout out to message bottles. And if you don't know what I mean by that, maybe you should go reread Arc 1 a little bit. Anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, like, the way that Ryukishi writes Umineko, because we are in the Umineko section, like, all the game boards and the stuff that he lays out, is obviously designed with a very specific, like culprit in mind at the end of the day, but you could take a lot of those game boards in a lot of different ways. And I think that if he had decided to just suddenly change the culprit, he would have been able to do it. I think he would have, because he had a very specific idea he was going for, but you could, and there are people that have.
I think perhaps the better example of how he could have changed Umineko is actually Arc 7 with the death of BT.
Sure.
Because it is so obvious how
much that impacted
the design of that arc.
Yeah, their opening in particular.
And I think that if BT hadn't died, we would have had, probably the same beats, but with a very different execution. Yeah. And that's kind of almost like a package to summarize how these things can change. As you were saying with the whole tabletop thing, it's common practice in the tabletop, area if like your players go, oh man, this character's doing this one thing, isn't he? And that character's not doing that one thing, but you then go, you know what? Maybe he is.
Yeah, my favorite one is when my players have had an ally for a really long time, and they say, is he working against us? And a lot of the time you should say yes. You should say, actually, he has been working against you the entire time. It's also equally fun for the players to say, he's been working against us, and for you to say, no, he hasn't. And so then when they break down his door and they throw him out of bed and they look through his stuff and they find nothing, that's equally fun sometimes.
Yeah. I think that it's actually important to shape your stories as they go.
Yep.
Like the whole thing, especially when we get to episode 3 of Umineko, with how that arc was completely redesigned because of the response to arcs 1 and 2.
Yep.
Like, I think it's very important to respond to not only what you yourself have written, which is what Ryukishi is great at doing, as Umineko will show based off Higurashi.
Shout out to Vigilius.
Yeah, but also just because, like, you don't know how people are going to interpret things when you start what you're going to make. So once you get that feedback, you should integrate that feedback.
And that's something that Ryukishi does all the heckin' time. That's like all his all-cast review sessions, all of his like openings, the way that he structures his mysteries changes in every arc based on what people told him. They told him, we like the murder mystery. And it's like, all right, it's a murder mystery now. It's not just a silly fun time with occasional bad things that happen. It's now a mystery.
Yeah.
It's not just a tragedy. It's about stopping the tragedy, right?
I think the other thing I wanted to point out before we close this one out, this is kind of a very different point, but the way that episode 3 in Umineko is very, very similar in kind of, I guess difficulty would be the way that I'd put it most simply.
That's how Ryukishi would put it, for sure.
To arc 3 of Higurashi.
Yeah.
Because I think both of them are the arc that, at least of the question arcs for each book story, they're the ones with the most obvious solution.
Yes, I believe.
And that is done with the intention of showing the reader what is possible within the rules of his game.
Yep.
So I do wonder, especially now that we have the whole, Keiichi on the horizon.
If it'll follow that pattern.
If arc 3 will be like the obvious one to set up the rules of the game. And also if there are any other parallels that I might draw out in editing of like how Ryukishi's paced these stories similarly.
Yeah. I mean, only time will tell at this point when we get to Keiichi.
Yeah.
I hope that he does something different. As I mentioned last recap or a couple episodes ago or whatever it was, how the way that Ryukishi views the arc structure, the trilogy structure, as being the first one does like a new thing, and the second arc flips that premise around, and the third one is supposed to do the first one but better, which you could argue that for episodes 1, 2, and 3, and then also for arcs 1, 2, and 3 maybe for Higurashi. But I wonder if we'll also see that pattern emerge when Keiichi releases, if we say, well, Higurashi is a relatively straightforward mystery, and then Umineko flips that on its head and says, let's deconstruct the mystery and like what the mystery genre really is. If Keiichi is going to be a recreation of Higurashi in some way, or if he's going to try and strike out.
I'm certainly very interested. I think the final parallel I probably can think of off the top of my head between the two is this is the arc where we've introduced like new characters that actually seem to have a fairly heavy play. Like we introduced Kasai and Shion last time, and Shion's obviously a very significant one, but I think Kasai is just kind of a side character, whereas,
Kasai.
This time we've got Teppei and Irie, who both seem like they're kind of going to be big hitters in the further story.
Yeah, maybe.
And that was kind of a similar pacing event that happened in 2 and 3 of Umineko as well. Like,
Sure.
we started to get, we got our first taste of magic characters in episode 2, then we got some bigwig magic characters in episode 3. So, in terms of what'll happen in the next arc for Higurashi, considering what happened in terms of characters for episode 4 of Umineko, I'm scared.
I don't think you should be scared, but we'll see how we go.
Either way,
Just be prepared. I'm sure it'll be fine.
the post-edit recap will be coming out in a few minutes if you're watching this on launch day. Thank you so
Sure.
much for joining us.
Yeah.
It's time to start Himatsubushi.
Himatsubushi, hype!
Time to waste some time.
Let's do it with the cats!
Cats?
Cats.